And here we go. So, uh, well, I'm looking at this stuff up close. Okay, sorry you were spared some of the misery that I've had to endure the last few days looking at this crap. Um, it really does look like the last days of an empire, or I don't know, something. It's it, I'm watching an endless stream of people on television mouth like sort of disconnected platitudes, and nobody talking about the essence, which is that the Democratic National Committee and the Democratic National Convention process for selecting a presidential candidate has finally imploded to the point where it doesn't select a candidate, not even in pretense. That has already happened without a single vote being cast for Kamala Harris or for Walz. And they're keeping the delegates who are supposed to be here with that power in their hands entertained, running them around Chicago. But they're sort of like purposeless here, all dressed up and nowhere to go, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree with you, Don. I think you have really described what's going on. It's a distraction. It seems like uh, a bunch of delusional people who are trying to perform happiness and joy and optimism for the television cameras, but don't believe it. And listening to the speeches, and I haven't listened to all of them, it's difficult, of course. uh, they don't believe what they're saying.
They can't.
I was listening to AOC, and it was a complete empty performance, and not a very good one. And Obama, Barack Obama, uh, it was just unbelievable to see how disconnected he was from the speech he was giving. He does not believe it. And in fact, I picked up that as he spoke about the 11 weeks ahead before the election and what needed to be done, he was skeptical about whether or not the Democratic Party and the Kamala Harris campaign can pull it off. Um, and yeah, that's what I got. Um, yeah, I would agree with you. The world is collapsing around the American empire. They're losing wars in the Ukraine and in the Middle East. And the majority of people do not believe in them and do not believe in their system, according to quite reliable polls. But yet they are introducing a candidate who is the most unpopular vice president in the history of polling about vice presidents. And according to a really reliable poll, 70% of the American people, and this is very recently, said that the economic and political systems had to be fundamentally changed or torn down and a new system built. So what's going on inside the United Center in Chicago is almost like an insane asylum where deranged and people who are delusional and a bit schizophrenic, perhaps drunk even.
Yeah, some of that.
Yes, some of that, yes. Are performing for an audience that they think exists, but frankly, by the time the performance starts, most people are in their beds sleeping.
Yeah, that's I'm kind of shocked
Mhm.
that no one has just stood up and said, "Wait a minute, wait." Um, I don't know how many delegates there are in the Democratic Party's nominating process this
I
year.
think I think delegates and delegates are something like 4,000, over 4,000.
Okay,
Um, delegates and those
super
who would
delegates and
replace
whatever.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, about over a little over 4,000.
So I'm shocked that not one of them has said this. What is this process here? We ran as a slate of delegates in a primary election according to rules that we haggled over since 4 years ago and haggled over 4 years before that, and going back to George McGovern and going back to Mississippi Free Democrats in 1964 and going back to 1940s and what happened in all these different conventions. All this historical development and process, which is abandoned completely in 2020 to put Biden on the ballot, and and they blame that on COVID, and now it's even worse
Yeah,
because they went through the motions and now they're just throwing it out wholesale.
yeah.
Not one person is opening their mouth.
Well, nothing is done publicly yet, but
Right.
behind the scenes, at the level of the elites who run the party, in fact, the ones who engineered the coup against Joe Biden to force him out, uh,
Mm.
and those who oppose that coup, uh, I think they're engaged in something of a bitter, intense struggle. And many of them, I would suggest, hate each other more than they hate Trump. And the element of spite and get back, and the sense on the side of Biden that you guys didn't have to stab him in the back this way. And then on Monday, the day where he was supposed to give his final speech
Yeah.
as a Democratic maybe candidate or former candidate, they put him on at about 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time and then rushed him out as soon as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was completely humiliated while they're saying he's a great man and
Yeah.
yada, yada, yada. I mean, this can't work. The more I think about it, Don, they got 11 weeks. They can't pull it together. Maybe they can. I don't see how they do it.
And then forgetting everything else that's going on here, there is the rest of the world too.
Yes.
And I was completely shocked to see this rumor being floated that Kennedy is looking at dropping out and taking signing up with Trump.
Yeah.
You know, there was this little rumor floated last week that the opposite, that he was going to drop out and sign on with Biden Harris, which he rejected out of hand when they said it. But they must have known that this him doing something with Trump was a possibility imminently, and they decided to try to get a jump on it, PR wise, by making it look like he's just bidding out for a job
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to having an ideological problem.
Yeah. Well, Don, this is a very close election.
Yep.
I would suggest that something close to 300,000 votes or voters in 7 battleground states could decide the whole thing, or maybe 100,000 in the 3 industrial states of the Midwest, Pennsylvania, right, Michigan, and Wisconsin,
right,
could decide this. A small number of votes could decide the whole thing.
Mm.
Therefore, Kennedy dropping out, and let us say in a state like Pennsylvania, where he was on an average of polls, somewhere around 5% of the vote, maybe a little more.
Yep.
Well, that decides Pennsylvania
Yeah.
and maybe Wisconsin.
Maybe
Not to
Michigan too.
mention the political capital that he would bring, given his name is Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the weight that he would bring to the whole thing. This move has incalculable consequences. We just don't know how it will completely play out. But in a very close election where a few number of votes could decide the whole thing, he might be the one to decide who will be the next president.
Yeah, wouldn't that be interesting? I was just struck by an irony here. They've been invoking the organizers of the protests against the DNC here, and I'd like to get into that some when we have a minute. Have used in the background, and also some of their opponents, political opponents, have tried to impute to them this idea of recreate 68, with an assumption in there, which of course is another issue too, that 1968 in essence was a riot by anti-war activists that was a big mess up of the Democratic convention, and some even blamed Nixon's election on that and the continuation of the war, etc. In fact, an interesting irony would be, that if the political process somehow got set right, to the extent that matters, because the assassination of Robert Kennedy in 1968 and the assassination of Martin Luther King in 1968 were two important occurrences, things that happened that set the country wrong, no matter where its point of origin was. And so maybe recreating 68 doesn't necessarily mean throwing paintballs at a synagogue or something, but rather setting the country right, to the extent possible, politically, with Bobby Kennedy as an agent of that.
I don't think I'm quite as optimistic about that.
I didn't say it was going to happen. I just thought it was an interesting possible irony, that's all.
Yeah, a possible irony. I think we're entering a period of American national politics, the likes of which we have not seen before. Mm-hmm. And no matter who wins the election, the political and ideological, in fact, crisis of the country only deepens. Because the people are asking, can the ruling class rule? And can the crisis of legitimacy be resolved or solved in one election, no matter who wins? The country is deeply divided. I mean, really deeply divided. And this election by both sides is seen as a zero-sum game. If you win, I lose. If I win, you lose. And there is no compromise. There is no meeting in the middle. The center has collapsed. The center has not held. Right. And as the poem goes, and things have fallen apart. This is where we are. And frankly, November 6th, the day after the election, is as important as November 5th. Yeah. It is the beginning or the end of a beginning, and perhaps a new moment in struggle. We're full scale in what Antonio Gramsci called a interregnum. And it's not clear how the new will be born from this interregnum. So here we are. And don't rule out the possibility of a civil war, albeit a low-level civil war. We don't know where it might go. And the other thing is, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels observation in the Communist Manifesto, a period that is stuck like we are could lead to the ruin of all classes, the destruction of society itself.
Mm.
So there is no easy answer. There is no easy solution to this crisis. And perhaps it makes sense, looking at what is ahead of us, that the Democratic Party delegates said, we'll use this opportunity to go full-scale delusional. And it's like partying on the Titanic. And, you know, partying like Prince would say, partying like it's 1999.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, right. Or party like it's 1929.
Yeah, well, cool. Yeah. Or when did the Titanic go down? Was that 1919?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, same difference.
But they're always good times to party, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of, I don't know. I'm having a hard time facing the fact that the best that they can do is this 4-day TV show. I guess I'm kind of ashamed of the fact that they could dig out 4,000 or 5,000 people out of the American people who would be willing to sit up there and smile and just perpetrate this enormous fabrication for the little bit of prestige or whatever get back they got for doing it, and know that there's like a line going out the door and around the block for hiring the next group.
Yeah.
You know, people signing up to do it.
Well, I think we have to, you know, sociologically study who the delegates are. I would suggest that if you looked at other televised Democratic Party conventions, you could see discernibly the presence of workers. I mean, actual workers. And they would more than not, or most often, have on something that showed that they were from this or the other union.
Yeah.
I don't think that was apparent on the floor of this convention.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, the Democratic Party has become a party, a quote, and I use quotes here, a coalition of distinct identity groups. It's an identity politics party.
Yeah.
So you get gays and trans here, you get women here, you get blacks there, you get Latinos somewhere else, and maybe a smattering of trade unionists somewhere in the mix.
Right.
And somehow, if you can hold all of that together, you can get a majority and hopefully an electoral majority. If you can't hold it together, for example, as is the case, I think, Black people begin to leave the party or become less enthusiastic about it.
Right.
If, as is the case, the vast majority of working people have left the Democratic Party. So you have, you know, some UAW members there, and Sean Fain speaking and being told by his members, your politics don't reflect ours, which I would think is quite embarrassing for him. So this is what we're looking at. And I agree with your initial thing. We might be looking at the end of a national party. And this thing could completely fall apart. And if the Democrats don't win in November, there is going to be the pointing of fingers and the blaming and
gnashing of teeth.
Oh yeah. And then if they win, Kamala Harris as president can't unite the party.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you're going to have Schumer and whoever comes after him, or Hakeem Jeffries and Bernie Sanders, in the Senate and the House, vying for power through the media and
Right.
tearing. And Kamala, I don't think, is a strong enough political presence in the Democratic Party to unite it in the campaign, or even if she wins afterwards.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think she doesn't stand on anything.
No, she doesn't.
She
She
didn't
doesn't.
win a single vote. She didn't have, she was appointed. Whoever appointed her owns her,
Yeah,
I don't know, whatever it is.
yeah. And this coronation is not going down all that well with everybody.
No, not hardly with anybody, really.
Not hardly with anybody. I agree with that.
So, meanwhile, we got the street game going on here, so to speak. And it's not the kind of street game that we envision or might envision, where the people who have been sort of either in tow or towing, depending on which fantasy you believe,
Yeah.
by the Democratic Party or towing the Democratic Party politically, the activists who, are ideological, who are anti-war, anti-racist, anti-sexist, pro-worker, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's 3 or 4 of them still left somewhere, and and they were called on in the midst of the horrors in Gaza to come here to shut down the DNC or to do something to announce we aren't tolerating this crap. So for a year, the organizers were, I will put it, wrestling with the city and state over permit parameters. How many people can we have? How close to the DNC can we march? How much of a nuisance can we make of ourselves to make our point, etc. And as they were doing it, you have to project the an estimate of the people that are going to attend, and that is an important number for a lot of reasons, including it becomes self fulfilling in that if you announce 15,000 people is going to be the limit of your uh, protest, then you can guarantee the police will see to it that that is in fact the limit of your protest. And so if you're planning to end a genocide in Gaza that has not been ended 10 months later by bringing 15,000 people to Chicago to march for a minute 10 blocks away or whatever from the DNC, I'd like to understand the mechanics of that, because I really don't see how that is a threat to power or, an induction to control the power or anything related to it. And that's the only thing that's being really thrown in, with any force at all at the DNC, which is the party of the current war with Russia and all the other horrors that we're involved in right now.
Yeah. Unless we are to assume that the organizers of the protest are completely naive and inexperienced, and I think there's a little bit of that, we have to look somewhere else for an explanation. And I would suggest that the organizers of this, at least at the top of it, the main ones, wanted to demonstrate, but did not want to do anything to damage either Biden, if he were the nominee, or Kamala Harris. So a good number of the organizations and organizers were pro-Biden, pro-Kamala Harris, and mildly anti-genocide. I would have expected that in Chicago, in the Midwest, where you have a huge Arab and Palestinian population, to not get any more than turned out.
I know.
I think it was doomed from the beginning because those who were organizing it were not fully committed to it and only wanted to slap Kamala Harris on the wrist and say, well, do something, but we're going to support you anyway. So it was what it could only be. And so you get some far leftists who are then forced to try to do their own thing to make the issue of genocide at least a visible issue in the street.
Yeah.
Certainly not in the, in the convention. So I think we have to look at who were the organizers, what were the organizations, and then we will have to assess them going forward, because there certainly going forward has to be a loss of trust in a number of these anti-Zionist or anti-genocide forces who are also pro the political party and the candidates that are genocidists themselves.
Right, that's right. The fundamental ones. Yeah.
You couldn't, it's like running with the foxes and hunting with the hounds, or trying to ride two horses going in opposite direction. It does not work.
That's right.
And it's a great big disappointment given the large sizes of demonstrations that were held in Washington, D.C. Earlier this year. And then the civil disobedience all across the country. And, they didn't even have a plan to conduct any form of civil disobedience. And so they were overwhelmed by the Chicago police and with the threat of bringing in the National Guard. But they were not prepared. And, the potential was for over 100,000 people to show up.
Yeah.
But the organizers were committed to making sure that did not happen. And that's the way I see them.
Yeah, it's difficult to argue with it. I mean, I can't look inside someone's eyes and see their heart like George Bush or Hillary Clinton or other, noted philosophers of the heart. But I can make some deductions just in terms of, forgetting their intent. This is what happened and this is what followed. And probably there's a relationship between the two. This is an ineffective strategy if what you're trying to do is to stop the genocide, or in addition to that, change the power relations so that the people conducting the genocide are no longer in a position to wield any power. Because you want to do that too, I guess, right? And so that's where we are. We have all these huge needs and all these things in motion, including people, and really not yet seeing the development of any strategy that's going to help us solve these problems.
Yeah, they claim that there were 200 organizations supporting this. Really? Were they legitimate? Were they real organizations, or were they paper organizations? Were they organizations with constituents, or were they these micro few people organizations?
Right, that's right.
It was a fraud, and it literally did damage to the pro-Palestine, pro-Gaza, anti-Zionist movement. After a whole spring of student encampments, of civil disobedience, of shutting down highways and train stations and airports, inspiring a world movement of solidarity with the encampments and civil disobedience here and with the Palestinians. After all of that, this is what we end up with. I think we have to look to who the organizers are. And then, let me say another thing. In the list of demands, they didn't even call for a ceasefire. Or, as I could see, the demands that I saw, they did not even call for an end to military shipments to Israel.
Yeah.
And in the course of organizing for all of this, only a couple of weeks ago, maybe not 2 weeks ago, the Biden administration announced that they were sending $20 billion more to Israel in the face of all of the opposition throughout the world and in this country. And this is all y'all could pull together? No, it was undermined by people who claim to be organizing it.
I guess we got to figure out who's supposed to be working on that and try to put them in this driver's seat at some point.
Yeah.
So,
They have something to answer for.
we all do.
Mhm.
This is all of our failing in one way or another.
I wouldn't say all of ours. I wouldn't. On this, I won't take responsibility. I wanted to be there, but after I saw, and to bring the Saturday Free School and other people, we were planning to come out there to take, at least 40, 50 people from Philadelphia. But then it appeared early on to me that it was very shaky.
Yeah.
And for us, it would have been a waste of money and time. And then I speculated, well, if it's going to amount to anything, it will be the Arab and Palestinian communities in the Midwest, in Michigan and in Illinois and so on. But they seemed to have backed off of it. And let's be real. This is in states, Michigan, Wisconsin, where during the Democratic Party primaries, there was at least 100,000 people who voted non-committed. And there's several delegates in the convention who were elected as delegates based upon the non-committed vote. There was everything in place to make this at least in terms of numbers, a respectable and credible and significant demonstration, marches and so on. And none of it materialized.
Well, nobody's going home yet. We've got one more day. We'll see what develops.
We'll see.
Professor Monteiro, thank you so much for your time, and we'll speak with you again tomorrow, I hope, if you got time for us.
Okay, and Don, we in the Free School are doing a online discussion of the Democratic Convention tonight. Central Time, Chicago time, between 5 and 7, and East Coast between 6 and 8. And if anybody is interested, they could join the discussion at our Facebook page, the Saturday Free School. Or I think you can go on YouTube. You can find us there, our YouTube channel. So I invite you and others to join us this evening, and we will continue it tomorrow.
Very good. Thank you very much. Take care, Doc.
Okay.